So I said I was gonna work on this video from my last one, and I said I wanted to address like the negative aspects of Detrans Awareness Day or Detransition Awareness Day, and I wanted to address like how the trans community kind of treats detransition people. Let's first define like what it even is. What is this day for those who have no idea what's going on, and you most likely don't. Detrans Awareness Day was on March 12th, and yes, I know that I am very late. It is in April by the time I am publishing this video, but you know, no time like the present, right? Better late than never, right? So, talking about it now. Anyway, so it was on March 12th. I don't know why specifically March 12th. I don't know the ins and outs of it. It was created by, from what I can gather, two detransitioned women in particular. One very famous, I'm sure you've heard, Kira Bell, and the other one, I don't know how to pronounce her first name, but I know she just goes by Watson, so I'll just go with that. She's cool! Kira is a young detransitioned woman from the UK, and, you know, Watson is also from the UK, but I don't think Watson sued the Tavistock and Portman NHS Trust, which thereby is preventing easy access to puberty blockers to kids aged like 16 and below. So Detrans Awareness Day was created not just to bring awareness to permanent detransitioned people and to show that we're not the tiny percentage that the trans community wants to believe we are and wants everybody else to believe we are, so we can simply be dismissed to favor their own desires. It was also created to show how poorly transition is managed by therapists, medical staff, teachers, APA, politicians. Before I jump in though, I want to say that not all trans people were disgusted by this day. There was actually quite a fair amount of kindness shown to detransition people, and a lot of trans people were very kind about it, and you know, that's good. Thank you. This video does not address you in particular. Onto the day itself. I posted a little thing on the day of, and I got really good reception on it, and it's my actual biggest post that I've ever made, and that feels a little foreign to me, but you know, I've never had a post that went to almost 200 likes before, so that's interesting and new. Anyway, so my perception of the day was pretty positive, but the detrans circle that I'm a part of, they kind of didn't get as great of a reception, unfortunately. And on Twitter, it was just kind of like tweets were being like hijacked left and right by a lot of people in the trans community trying to, you know, pretty much take attention away from detrans people, and that was, you know, really horrible. Bully tactics, if you will. Because of that bullying, there was a lot of detrans people who didn't want to announce their story. They didn't want to raise awareness. They didn't want to show themselves because they knew that they would get bullied. And yeah, they would have been bullied a lot of the time, except for apparently on Instagram, I guess. I don't know. But Twitter is very much the Wild West. There's just no filter on there. Another reason, that's why not enough people came forward, which then makes it look like to the trans community, oh, there's not that many detrans people who exist at all. And it's just like, yeah, that's because you bully them. That's why they don't come up. There's 3 different levels to how trans people view detransition. And the first level is they will very much remind everybody that detrans people are also people who are still trans identified, but they can't transition because of because parents, because their job, because society, because blah blah blah. Just something that makes it so that they can't, I guess, transition, and it's very dangerous for them to do it, or because medically they can't do it because their body can't take it. And so they're like, oh, those types of detrans people, that's an awareness day for them because they're still trans and they deserve to have recognition and kindness and compassion thrown their way. But then the second level is where they don't think there should be any awareness day, but at least other trans people within the community should offer compassion, understanding, and kindness their way. And those are the detrans people who are permanent, but, well, maybe they're permanent. Some of them do retransition because they still want to be part of the, the trans community, because they don't want to sever their umbilical cord to the trans community. These detransitioned people are okay because they want to still be connected to the trans community. They recognize that they weren't really trans during their trans phase. They were just confused, lost. They are avoiding criticizing the trans community because there's nothing to criticize at all because they were never trans. Just kind of sucking up to the, the big brother of the trans community. Those detransitioned people are fine, but they don't need a detrans awareness day. That's just whatever. Then the third most insidious, horrible, satanic level of detransitioning that you can be is people like me. There is no grace, no understanding, no compassion, no kindness to those who've permanently detransitioned, and they also criticize the transgender ideology. Those people are the gender devil, seeking to compromise the entire trans community, according to the trans community. No matter the approach that this detransition group of people or person, no matter what their approach is toward the trans community, no matter how level-headed, no matter how much they're like, I don't want the trans community to be like vulnerable, under attack. I don't want people to hate on them. They do deserve happiness and stuff, but because they're a movement, they can also be criticized. No matter how level-headed they are about that, those types of detransitioners are seen as horrible, and they shouldn't have an awareness day, and all trans people should just, shit on their parade, pretty much, is what I'm getting at. This whole reaction of the latter two detransition people, I'd say I'm disappointed in. Like, my expectations were very low to begin with. I wasn't expecting, like, the day to be set off with flying colors and fireworks were shooting out of nowhere and, oh my god, oh wow, what a beautiful day it is. Like, no, I wasn't expecting that. But it's still like, I'm disappointed that you couldn't give us one damn day out of, like, the hundreds of different awareness days for trans people. On Twitter, it was pretty much a dumpster fire on wheels. I heard, allegedly, I don't have a Twitter, so I don't really know. I heard that one particular trans person was like, I really don't like this day, and so they removed the hashtag altogether, and it looks like a lot of articles for DetransAwarenessDay Day have been removed as well. And I kind of have a feeling they were removed because of protecting trans people, or, protecting them from alternative ideas. Taking down the trending hashtag, that really set the tone for the entire day. It's really saying, you're not welcome here, I don't want you here, you make me feel very unsafe, you make me feel very threatened, and I don't want to see your ugly mug in my domain ever again. When it comes to detransitioners like myself, we are proof, and this is where the threatening thing comes from. We are proof that there's something faulty about not just the ideology, but also the medical practice of affirmative care. And this is threatening for multiple different reasons. When it comes to Kira Bell and some certain other detransitioners, I often read comments like, "You're killing us. You're making it so much harder for us to transition for those who need it to feel better and to be cured. I'm gonna commit the suicide." And, that's directed toward those such people. This is clearly, from my view, a temper tantrum made by kids and teens. And a lot of them are admittedly teens. They'll say, "Oh, I'm 16, Kira, you're killing me. I'm 15, Kira, you're killing me. I'm 12. It's like, oh my God, whoa. Somebody needs to help these kids. And not transition-wise, just someone needs to help them with their brain stuff. So what I want to do for the rest of this video is address those comments like, "I'm gonna commit suicide. I need these drugs to feel better about myself." I want to deconstruct those and to call out what it really is. So the first one is, you're making it harder for the rest of us to transition. And that one is, well, it's like, yeah, yep, you're pointing out exactly what's going on. We are trying to make it very much harder for you to transition. And I know that sounds like, "Oh, I knew it. They're all transphobic. They just want us all to die, don't they?" And it's like, no, just hear me out. Making it harder for trans people, especially the really, really young ones, helps you in the long run, and believe it or not, but we're doing you a favor, even though it doesn't look like it right now. The reason why we want to raise awareness of detransitioning is because there is more than less than 1% of remission rates for gender dysphoria, or I guess trans identification, I suppose. Many who believe they need a medical transition are far too young to know what they're talking about and want. This approach of delaying immediate gratification, it saves you from yourself. If we make it harder for people to transition, then you might find that would-be trans people / people with gender dysphoria do get more well-read on transition and decide to not transition, thereby erasing the next quote, "Don't blame us for your mistakes." Parts of the trans community who say these types of things look at detransitioners and tell them they are to blame for their own mistakes, that they should have done more research and known better about what they were getting themselves into. Doctors and therapists can't tell people with gender dysphoria all the ins and outs us detransitioners wish we had heard, so we'd know what we were getting ourselves caught up into. They're not allowed to tell us and, everybody who has gender dysphoria the bad parts or the alternatives, because it's written into law that they can't, or they'll lose their license as therapists. And I don't know what happens to doctors, but I'm sure they also lose something. They lose their job probably, just like therapists would. If they were allowed to actually say alternatives and stuff, and actually provide a lot of research studies and other things that have been censored online, us detransitioners likely would have never transitioned to begin with. And not just doctors and therapists, but school teachers, university professors, certain parents, mostly the internet, have flooded the veins of our society with pro-transition. No one in mainstream medicine / society is able to share the drawbacks to transition because that's otherwise labeled transphobic. So how does one know better? How does one do their research? My main point here is that the treatment medically, psychologically, and interpersonally is the same exact treatment detrans and trans people are receiving. There's no point to saying you should have known better, because we're literally not allowed to. This is called setting you up for failure, which is an abuse tactic. And moreover, on the first quote of "Don't blame us," blame is a two-way street. I can't be held accountable. The other detransition people who are permanent. They can't be held 100% responsible for our underage actions. And most of us were teenagers, dumbass teenagers who made a dumbass decision. Because that's what teenagers are. They're dumb. They don't know what they're doing. We didn't know what we're doing. Today's teens have no idea what they're doing. All teens throughout the entire history of humankind have no idea what they're doing. Why do you think somehow trans teenagers today are somehow, they like know all the things? Like that's just grossly irresponsible to say that. Anyway, I'm getting ahead of myself. We can't be held responsible for our underage and probably drug-induced slash, like what if somebody was in a manic, bipolar manic state and they went for it and it felt good at the time. Like, that's not clear-headed. Making these underage actions and an impulsive decision-making when our therapists and doctors were very much to blame for enabling our transition. But above them, as I was saying, the responsibility is on the shoulders of those who wrote into law the standards of transgender care. Perhaps the people who are saying these things personally are not to blame for the detransitioners' transition, especially because a lot of them are younger than us. But, some of them are older. But the point is, it's obvious you are not directly responsible unless you are part of how affirmative care got into law and why any alternative method to transition is considered conversion therapy. Like, okay, if you're a part of that, then yeah, okay, we can blame you a little bit. And although we had the final decision to put ourselves onto testosterone for women and testosterone blockers and estrogen for men, we could have opted out. We could have said no to it, but like any teenager, we were highly susceptible to suggestion. With so much influence, and words can't even describe the magnitude of this influence on the internet, and our therapists not allowed to question us, to pump the brakes on transition and gender identity stuff. And the support group I personally went through, who refused to suggest any alternative methods because it's socially unacceptable to do so. Like, yeah, no shit, it's not our fault 100%. Like, that's crazy to even say that. Another comment is, "You're killing us." That one's really popular when it comes to preventing them from going through transition. This is obviously referring to their suicide bait, which they use excessively to emotionally manipulate people to make headway in activism. "You're killing us" is actually just an abuse tactic to make you feel guilty and do as they say because you wouldn't want to be complicit in potential assisted suicide. Suicide's kind of a taboo subject, so there's kind of like that bubble of protection for them when they announce it to other people. Trans people use suicide bait because this is what they've been told to do. And so, and when I say that, I'm saying like a lot of these teenagers and some of the adults as well, some of them don't even like have suicide ideation. They just kind of feel inspired to have it because the rest of the community has said trans or die, basically. And they believe that. Like, I don't really blame them for having those thoughts. I just wish they would get the help that they truly need so that they don't have suicide ideation. I mean, same goes to the ones who are genuinely and have had suicide ideation before trans stuff. It's like, you need help! Anyway, so these types of people who have been told be trans or die, they've never been exposed to alternative methods of transition because the rest of the trans community refuses to acknowledge that there are alternatives because they believe that those methods are conversion therapy, as I said. So really what's happening here is that the trans community themselves, I would say analytically, they are the ones who are killing gender dysphoric kids / ignorant adults. Detransitioners have been made out to be the scapegoat in this situation. The next comment is, and this one's really popular, "You were never trans, you were cis the entire time." I used to believe this one, and I used to go around saying things like, oh, when I was masquerading around as a transgender person, or when I thought I was trans. Because when I detransitioned, I just sort of thought, like, well, I guess I'm not trans. Despite all of that stuff, while I was trans, I thought I was the truest, because being a former trans med, while I was on testosterone, and while I was looking for double mastectomy surgeons, and I was kind of like eyeballing bottom surgery a little bit, I thought I was being true trans because I wanted medical transition. And you know, with trans meds, like, yeah, oh yeah, that's true trans right there. To say to a detransitioner we were cis the entire time isn't even medically accurate, because all of us, or the most of us maybe, did experience gender dysphoria. We did feel an incongruence between our body and our idea of gender. We checked off many, if not all, the boxes off the DSM-5, just like most trans-identified people do as well currently. Cis people don't check off any or very little. This argument, I would say, is very vapid. It's the no true Scotsman fallacy. We were trans, whether you like it or not. The umbrella for trans identification is so broad, there really isn't any true way to be trans. Non-binary folk who dress and act in accordance to their sex but feel like the opposite and claim that they are the opposite sex aren't that far removed from cis people, yet they're trans. Where's the logic in that? That's kind of what I'm posing. Trans people often see detransition as merely a tattoo, or a bad haircut we regretted, or perhaps a divorce somebody's gone through. And there's no awareness days for those because, right, who cares? And I would say when trans people say that, yeah, who cares about when you have a bad tattoo, or when you have had a bad haircut, or you went through a divorce? You know, life moves on. You can remove a tattoo fairly easily, and your hair grows out eventually, and maybe you'll find love in the future, or you become a monk or a nun and never have a relationship ever again. Meanwhile, when it comes to breast tissue, for example, that's not something that you can replace. Nor can phalloplasty be reversed, or vaginoplasty can be reverted back into a willy. That doesn't happen. The gross overgeneralization, but also, like, it doesn't even add up. It doesn't make sense to me how you could possibly compare a tattoo, something that's literally surface level, to something that's so invasive as a double mastectomy or a vaginoplasty. That, I'm sorry, you'd have to be insane to think that it's as mundane as a tattoo. A lot of these people who are saying this haven't had these surgeries, and I know some of them for a fact have not had a double mastectomy at all, and they're the ones who are saying, oh, well, it's just like a tattoo. And then there's other people who, you know, for the trans women, they don't have the double mastectomy. The only real surgery that they go through is for top surgery. I mean, it's not very invasive. It's just putting implants between the chest wall and the muscle or whatever. And there's nothing really to regret there. I guess that's more on par with a tattoo. But when it comes to a woman with actual breast tissue and milk ducts and all that, all those glands, this, that, the other, that's way more invasive. It's not a tattoo. Like, sure, I guess as far as comparisons go, yeah, both double mastectomy and a tattoo is an elected thing. You go in and you choose to have it, and sometimes you pay out of pocket, sometimes you don't, but not with tattoos, may I remind you. That being said, a double mastectomy is, by and large, to the trans community, considered a medical necessity. It could have been a medical necessity in the eyes of that detransition person who was being trans at the time. Maybe they thought they needed it. You don't know. You can't assume. But the reason why no one's made an awareness day for bad tattoos is that there isn't an entire culture rallying politically for tattoos, to put them into law, to make certain aspects of tattoos illegal or legal, and kids aren't being coerced into getting them after they've taken some blind interest in them because someone suggested it to them. May I put emphasis on the fact that double mastectomies are very much invasive and painful, with lasting pain as well as numbness in and around the scars. Not to mention you could lose your nipple. You will lose all ability to breastfeed if you happen to desire children at some point in your life. Real breasts don't need to replace about every decade, unlike implants, and using one's fat from your stomach is invasive and risky and could atrophy and go black. All of these arguments feel as though they come from children or highly emotionally unintelligent people who have tunnel vision only for what they want and have zero regard for other people and their feelings. I see no humanity behind any of these arguments, and like I said, it disappoints me. I'm not personally hurt by it. I'm just sad that there's so many people that aren't taught how to be polite and to think about, you know, putting yourself in the shoes of somebody else. It's just apathy. I'm disappointed to see that that's how our society is these days. Do these people perhaps think that if they said something that acknowledged our existence as human beings with thoughts and feelings that can be hurt and damaged and traumatized, then maybe we'd all get along a little bit better? If we see kindness and an effort to be compassionate from the other side, we will gladly extend the same thing, the same courtesy to those people. The more compassion you give, the less transphobia will rear its ugly head in your direction. And I think it's very important to note that you get back what you put in. So if you put hate into a situation, you're gonna get hate back. You say these hurtful comments, of course somebody's gonna be angry in response to you. It's just because how a trans person sees a detransition person arguing about something or saying like they're hurt by something, so they're gonna say something hurtful back. It's not because they're just naturally transphobic, and transphobic people just naturally have hate in their hearts and they just irrationally hate and fear trans people. Hate and fear doesn't just come out of nowhere. It's because they've been hurt, traumatized, threatened, bullied, abused by trans people. Wrapping it up, I guess, the whole point of this Awareness Day is not to put trans people down. That was never the whole point. And I think it's kind of selfish to think, oh, well, you're just doing it to attack me. Like, where's your evidence? Where's your proof that people who are saying, hey, I was 16 when I transitioned and this is what happened, and now I'm not that anymore, and I was using trans identification as a coping mechanism for my self-hatred. It's like, how is that attacking you? That's not. It really says more about you than it does the detransition person, how you're reacting to it. Anyway, so the point is, we don't want there to be regret. And it's delusional, naive, and ignorant to believe that transition is the only way when gender dysphoria is experienced, or you simply believe that you're trans without gender dysphoria. To reduce transition regret, we need to have more filters on who gets the green light for transition and who gets the red light. It shouldn't be easy because we don't want you to transition and regret it. This whole thing, abolishing gender affirmative care, would be beneficial to everybody. And that's my thing on that. I guess my closing statement would be, it shouldn't be threatening that detransition people exist. It shouldn't be threatening that we have opinions on what happened. We should be allowed to have opinions just as trans people have their opinions. To be a fair society, we should want to listen to what other people have to say. Personally, I just wish that there was just more compassion shared around. I wish that more people would actually listen to each other and not just jump to conclusions and think selfishly, oh, you're just attacking me. Oh, you're just blaming MTFs for all your problems. Like, no, we're not blaming you specifically. It's the whole thing. It's the trans activism that has made the Leela Alcorn law. It's affirmative care. It's trying to make everything out that goes against trans affirmative stuff as conversion therapy. Like, we need more, I don't know, I guess preventative care. We need to overall just pump the brakes on it, because having this breakneck speed of affirmative care is not doing anybody any good, I don't think. I think that's all I have to say on this matter. I have no idea when I'm gonna record again, so again, I'll see you when I see you. I hope this video was okay. Goodbye.